They fired on a human hospital ship and awakened a galactic genius. Dr. Kira Ashworth wiped the purple blood from her hands as she finished treating the Vorthak warrior's shattered ribs. The alien's breathing was labored, his four eyes darting nervously around the medical bay of the hospital ship Mercy's Call. Pain was universal, she thought, no matter how many limbs or eyes a species had. "How many more incoming?" she asked Nurse Coordinator Zara Hendricks, who was managing the triage stations with practiced efficiency. "Captain Rourke says another transport just docked. 43 wounded from the Nexus Station bombing, mix of human and Krillian refugees," Zara replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion written across her face. Kira nodded and moved to the next biobed. The Mercy's Call had been operating in the war zone for 6 weeks straight, treating casualties from the brutal conflict between the Terran Coalition and the hegemony of Sektar. The massive white vessel, adorned with red medical crosses and protected by ancient galactic treaties, was a beacon of hope in the darkness of space. "The beauty of what we do," Dr. Amelia Carver said as he passed by carrying medical supplies, "is that we don't choose sides. We just heal whoever needs healing." Captain Noah Rourke made sure everyone understood their neutrality. The Mercy's Call was protected under the Geneva Convention of Space, ratified by every major power in the galaxy. They were untouchable, or so the law said. In the research lab, Dr. Axel Voss was quietly cataloging tissue samples from various species. His work focused on developing universal medical treatments. Most people aboard didn't know about his other background. Before becoming a xenobiologist, he had been a strategic analyst for Coalition intelligence. His mind was a steel trap for patterns, connections, and possibilities. "Dr. Voss," called Communications Officer Indy Blackwood from her station. "Priority transmission from Coalition Command." Voss walked over, still wearing his blood-stained lab coat. Indy handed him the decoded message, and his expression grew cold as he read it. "What is it?" Kira asked, noticing the change in his demeanor. "Sektar battle fleet approaching, Grand Admiral Zekthol commanding. 12 dreadnoughts, 37 destroyers." Voss's voice was barely above a whisper. Captain Rourke heard this and immediately activated the ship's communication array. "This is Captain Rourke of the hospital ship Mercy's Call. We are broadcasting our medical neutrality codes on all frequencies. We have wounded from multiple species aboard. We are protected under Galactic Medical Convention, Article 7. Dr. Bethany Cross, who was coordinating the emergency surgery schedules, looked worried. "Should we begin evacuation procedures?" "Absolutely not," Rourke said firmly. "We're a protected vessel. They can't touch us. It's been galactic law for over 2 centuries. But Voss didn't look convinced. He had studied Sektar military doctrine extensively during his intelligence days. Grand Admiral Zekthol was notorious for his belief that humans were a plague on the galaxy, too dangerous to be trusted even in their mercy missions. 3 hours later, the Sektar fleet materialized on the ship's long-range sensors, a wall of dark metal bristling with weapons. The Mercy's Call continued its medical operations, trusting in the laws that protected them. Kira was in the middle of removing shrapnel from a young Krillian civilian when the first warning came. "Sektar vessels are locking weapons on our position," Indy announced over the comm system. "They're not responding to our neutrality broadcasts." Voss stopped his work. He had been treating a critically injured Sektar soldier, barely more than a child, who had been captured in the fighting. The young alien looked up at him with frightened eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. "Everything's going to be fine," Voss told him, though uncertainty crept into his voice. Captain Rourke tried one final time. "Sektar fleet, this is the hospital ship Mercy's Call. We are clearly marked as a medical vessel. We have your wounded aboard. International law forbids any attack on..." The response came directly from Grand Admiral Zekthol himself. "Humans are a cancer in this galaxy. You use every advantage, every deception. Your hospital ships are just another weapon of war disguised as mercy." "That's completely false," Rourke protested. "We've saved thousands of your people." "Then you can die with them," Zekthol snarled. The first plasma torpedo struck the Mercy's Call near the engine compartment. The explosion sent shockwaves through the entire ship, knocking patients from their beds and sending medical equipment flying. Emergency lighting flickered on as the main power grid failed. "All hands, this is not a drill," Rourke announced. "We are under attack. Prepare for emergency evacuation." But there was no time. More torpedoes struck the ship in rapid succession. The hull began to buckle and tear. In the medical bay, patients screamed as their life support systems failed. Voss grabbed the young Sectar soldier and ran toward the escape pods. Behind him, he could hear Kira shouting orders to her medical team. "Get the critical patients to the pods first," she yelled. "Save who you can." Voss looked back and saw Kira throwing herself over a small human child, a refugee from the outer colonies who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. As burning debris fell from the ceiling, Kira used her own body as a shield. The final torpedo hit the medical bay directly. The explosion was catastrophic. Voss was thrown against the bulkhead, still clutching the wounded alien child. When the ringing in his ears stopped, he looked back. Kira was gone. So was the little girl she had tried to protect. So were hundreds of patients and medical staff who had dedicated their lives to healing others. Voss carried the traumatized Sectar child to an escape pod and sealed them inside. As their pod launched away from the dying ship, he watched the Mercy's call break apart. The beautiful white hospital ship with its red crosses was now just burning wreckage scattered across space. Rescue vessels arrived 2 hours later. They managed to save about 400 people from the escape pods, but over 2,000 had perished. Patients from both sides of the war, doctors, nurses, and support staff who had committed their lives to saving others. The Sectar had killed their own wounded along with the humans. Voss sat in the rescue ship, holding the small Sectar child who was crying inconsolably. The boy didn't understand why his own people had tried to kill him, but Voss understood. He understood everything now. Dr. Kira Ashworth was dead. Zara Hendricks was dead. Captain Rourke was dead. Hundreds of good people who had sworn to heal rather than harm were dead. And the galaxy's response would be the same as always. Some angry speeches, maybe a fine, but nothing that would truly matter. Voss looked out at the stars and made a promise. The people who did this would pay. Not just Grand Admiral Zekthul, but the entire system that made this possible. The galaxy was about to learn that attacking a human hospital ship was the worst mistake they could ever make. He would make sure of it. 4 months after the attack on the Mercy's call, the galaxy was still debating what had happened. The Galactic Council convened for weeks with representatives from dozens of species arguing about the incident. Everyone agreed it was tragic, but no one wanted to take serious action. The hegemony of Sectar issued a formal apology and offered financial compensation to the families of the victims. But when the council demanded they hand over Grand Admiral Zekthul for trial, they refused, claiming he was protecting his people from human deception. Axel Voss watched the news reports from his small apartment on Luna Station every day. Every day he saw politicians making empty speeches about justice and peace. Every day, nothing happened. The Sectar kept their admiral, kept their fleet, and kept acting like attacking a hospital ship was just another tactical decision. Voss had been having nightmares. He saw Kira dying over and over again, saw the little girl she had tried to save. The young Sectar soldier he had rescued was now in a detention facility because his own people considered him contaminated by human contact. After watching the council do nothing for months, Voss made a decision. He put on his old Coalition uniform and walked into the offices of the Terran Strategic Command. Admiral Dakota Pierce looked up from her desk, surprised. "Axel Voss, I heard you left military service permanently." "I had," Voss replied, "but circumstances change." Pierce studied him carefully. Voss had been one of the most brilliant strategic minds in the Coalition before he quit to pursue medicine. "What do you want?" "I want to help you win this war," Voss said simply. Pierce leaned back in her chair. "The war isn't going well. The Sectar have superior numbers, better technology, and their allies are growing stronger. What makes you think you can change that?" Voss looked at the tactical displays on Pierce's wall, seeing patterns and possibilities that others missed. "Because I understand something now that I didn't before. We've been fighting the wrong war." Commander Riley Thorne became Voss's liaison officer. She was sharp, ambitious, and quickly learned that Voss approached strategy differently than anyone else. He didn't just analyze fleet strengths and weapon capabilities, he studied everything: trade routes, resource flows, political alliances, even the psychology of different species. "What exactly are you looking for?" she asked one day, watching him pore over thousands of intelligence reports. "Pressure points," Voss said. "Everyone thinks war is about who has the biggest guns, but real war is about who can make the other side quit first." Lieutenant Commander Jax Morrison, who ran strategic intelligence, began feeding Voss classified data about Sectar operations. What they found was illuminating. "The hegemony isn't as strong as they appear," Morrison reported to Commander Thorne. "Their economy is heavily dependent on tribute from client species. They're spending enormous resources on military expansion while their colonial infrastructure crumbles." Voss nodded. "They depend on a complex web of trade agreements and resource extraction to maintain their war machine. If that web were to be disrupted, their entire military could collapse," Thorne finished. Voss began developing what he called cascade warfare. Instead of meeting the enemy's strength directly, he looked for ways to unravel their weaknesses. He studied their supply chains, their political structure, their economic dependencies. Dr. Mira Volkov joined the team as a xenopsychologist. She had spent years studying Sectar culture and helped Voss understand how the alien hierarchy thought. "Sectar society is built on dominance and submission," she explained. "Their leaders maintain power by appearing invincible. If they start losing face, their own subordinates will turn on them." "What about their allies?" Voss asked. "Different story entirely. The Keth joined the hegemony because they were threatened with extinction. The Vorthak are only participating because they're afraid of being conquered. Remove the threat, and you remove their motivation to fight." Voss began building a network of contacts across the galaxy: merchants, smugglers, diplomats, and dissidents. Slowly, he started to see opportunities that conventional strategists missed. The first test came during the siege of New Carthage. The Sectar fleet had surrounded the human colony, preparing for a final assault. Admiral Pierce wanted to send the entire Third Fleet to break the siege. "Don't," Voss said. "Let me try something else." Instead of sending ships to fight, Voss dispatched covert teams to sabotage 3 critical resource processing facilities in Sectar space. The attacks were precisely timed. Just as the hegemony fleet was ready to destroy New Carthage, their ships began running out of fuel and ammunition. The Sectar commander found himself commanding a powerful fleet that couldn't fight. Faced with the choice between retreating in shame or surrendering, he chose surrender, because in Sectar culture, surrender to a superior enemy was more honorable than retreat. Admiral Pierce stared at the reports in disbelief. "You defeated an entire battle fleet without firing a shot." "I made it impossible for them to fight," Voss corrected. "There's a difference." Word of the victory spread quickly through coalition forces. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about Axel Voss and his revolutionary approach to warfare. But Voss wasn't interested in fame. He was interested in justice. Commander Thorne watched him work 18-hour days, building something larger than just battle plans. "What's the end game here?" she asked him one evening. Voss looked up from his strategic projections. "The end game is making sure no one ever attacks another hospital ship." "How?" "By changing the fundamental power structure of the galaxy," Voss said. "Right now, the strong do what they want and the weak suffer. I'm going to flip that equation." Thorne didn't fully understand what he meant, but she was beginning to realize that Voss wasn't just planning to win battles. He was planning to restructure galactic civilization itself. The Sectar were starting to understand this too. After losing 6 more fleets to Voss's unconventional tactics, they began taking him seriously. Grand Admiral Zekthul himself sent a message to Coalition Command. "Tell your strategist that we know what he's doing, but he cannot win. We are stronger than humans. We always have been." Voss read the message and smiled. The first time anyone had seen him smile since the attack on the Mercy's Call. "He's right," Voss told Commander Thorne. "They are stronger than us. But strength isn't everything." "What is?" she asked. Voss looked at his star charts, seeing patterns and possibilities that others couldn't imagine. Intelligence, patience, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to protect innocent people. He turned back to his work, already planning the next phase of his campaign. The Sectar thought they understood humans. They thought they knew what they were fighting against. They were wrong. Axel Voss was about to show them what happened when you made an enemy of the most adaptable species in the galaxy. The attack on the Mercy's Call had awakened something in humanity that the aliens couldn't comprehend. And it was going to change everything. 2 years after the war began, Axel Voss had become the most feared human in the galaxy. He operated from his command center aboard the battleship Retribution, surrounded by holographic displays showing star maps, trade routes, and intelligence reports from across known space. Lieutenant Kai Nakamura had been his aide for 8 months and still couldn't figure out how Voss's mind worked. The man would stare at data streams for hours, seeing connections that no one else could identify. Then he would issue a few quiet orders, and entire enemy formations would find themselves trapped or helpless. "Sir, confirmation on the Vega operations," Kai reported. 7 more Sectar supply convoys intercepted. Their forward bases are now critically short of spare parts. Voss nodded without looking up from his analysis. "What about the economic reports from the neutral sectors?" "Captain Luna's teams are in position, ready to flood the Keth markets with cheap alternatives whenever you give the word." Captain Isabella. Luna had been a corporate negotiator before the war. Now she worked for Voss, running operations that looked like legitimate business deals but were actually weapons in a much larger campaign. Luna had contacts in dozens of star systems and could manipulate commodity prices, trade agreements, and supply chains without anyone realizing what was happening. Voss had recruited Luna because he understood something crucial. This war wouldn't be won by destroying enemy ships. It would be won by controlling the economic foundations that kept enemy civilizations functioning. Dr. Tobias Reed worked in the Technology Analysis Division, studying captured Sectar equipment. But Voss wasn't interested in copying alien weapons. He wanted to understand their vulnerabilities. "Every piece of Sectar technology has the same fundamental flaw," Reed explained during one of their briefings. "They prioritize raw power over adaptability. Their systems work perfectly under ideal conditions, but they're brittle when faced with unexpected variables." "Show me," Voss said. Reed activated a holographic display of a Sectar shield generator. "See these power conduits? They're incredibly efficient, but only within very specific parameters. Change the energy frequency by just 3% and the entire system overloads." Voss studied the display intently. "Can we build weapons that exploit this?" "Already in development," Reed said with a grin. While Reed worked on technology, Voss focused on the broader picture. He had divided his strategy into 4 interconnected campaigns: economic disruption, psychological warfare, political manipulation, and what he called cultural conversion. The economic disruption was exceeding all expectations. Human corporations, guided by intelligence from Voss's network, had begun offering superior products at lower prices throughout hegemony space. The aliens thought they were getting excellent deals, but the cheap human goods were systematically destroying local industries. Simultaneously, Luna's operation was creating artificial shortages of critical resources. Manufacturing plants would run out of raw materials, military bases would find themselves without spare parts, and civilian populations would face shortages of basic necessities. The psychological warfare was more subtle but equally effective. Voss had studied how different alien species processed information and emotion. He knew that Sectar leaders maintained power through displays of invincibility, so his operations were designed to make them look weak and incompetent. When a Sectar admiral would boast about an upcoming victory, Voss would ensure that victory turned into a humiliating defeat. When hegemony politicians promised their people quick success, Voss would drag the conflict out until those promises looked like lies. But the political manipulation was Voss's masterpiece. The hegemony of Sectar wasn't truly unified. It was a collection of conquered species held together by fear and tribute. Voss had been carefully exploiting those fractures. Commander Sage Williams ran Voss's intelligence operations. She was responsible for intercepting enemy communications and planting disinformation. Under Voss's guidance, She had been sending false messages designed to increase paranoia and distrust within the hegemony. The Keth are starting to withdraw their fleets from frontline positions, Williams reported. They think the main Sectar forces are planning to use them as cannon fodder. What about the Vorthak? Voss asked. Even better, 5 of their colony worlds have declared independence from the hegemony. They're requesting human protection and trade agreements. Voss allowed himself a small smile. The Vorthak had always been reluctant members of the hegemony. Now they were beginning to see humans as potential liberators rather than enemies. The breakthrough came when Voss made contact with a Sectar military commander named Tulveth. The alien had grown disgusted with Grand Admiral Zekthul's brutal tactics, especially the attack on the hospital ship. Through encrypted channels, Tulveth reached out to the humans. "Why would you betray your own people?" Voss asked during their first communication. "Because Zekthul has forgotten what we are supposed to be protecting," Tulveth replied. "We were meant to be guardians of order. Instead, we have become monsters who murder healers." Voss began secretly supplying Tulveth's rebel faction with weapons and intelligence. The rebels called themselves the True Hegemony and started launching attacks on Zekthul's forces from within Sectar space. Admiral Ravencross, who commanded the human fleets, watched in amazement as Voss's strategy unfolded. While she fought conventional battles to keep the enemy occupied, Voss was systematically dismantling their entire civilization. "How did you know this would work?" she asked during a strategy meeting. "Because I studied their history," Voss replied. "The hegemony has collapsed before. It took external threats to unite them. Remove those threats, and they revert to their natural state, fragmented and competitive." "But we're still their external threat," Cross pointed out. "Are we?" Voss asked. "Look at the intelligence reports. Half the hegemony thinks we're gonna lose and wants to make peace. The other half thinks we're gonna win and wants to switch sides. Nobody thinks this war is worth continuing." Cross reviewed the reports. Voss was right. The hegemony was fracturing and they hadn't fought a major fleet action in months. The final piece of Voss's plan fell into place when the Crystalline Dominion and the Neural Collective began paying attention to the war. These were 2 of the galaxy's major powers, and they were getting nervous about human capabilities. "They're sending diplomatic missions to both sides," Kai reported. "Looks like they want to mediate peace negotiations." Voss studied the diplomatic communications. They don't want peace. They want to understand how we're winning so they can prepare for their own potential conflicts with us. "What do we do about that?" "We show them that fighting humans is a losing proposition," Voss said. "But we do it carefully. We want them respectful enough to leave us alone, but not terrified enough to unite against us." Voss opened a secure channel to Admiral Pierce back on Earth. "Ma'am, I need authorization to expand operations beyond hegemony space." "What do you have in mind?" Pierce asked. "I want to send a message to every species in the galaxy. The message is simple. Leave humans alone, and we'll leave you alone. But if you attack our civilians, especially our medical personnel, we will make you regret it for the rest of your civilization's existence." Pierce was quiet for a long moment. "Axel, what you're describing sounds like taking control of the galaxy." "Yes, ma'am," Voss replied without hesitation. "That's exactly what it is." Voss looked out at the stars through the Retribution's main viewport. Somewhere in that vast darkness, the wreckage of the Mercy's Call still drifted, a monument to the day everything changed. Dr. Kira Ashworth had died trying to save a child. Now Voss was going to save everyone by ensuring that no one would ever dare attack the innocent again. The galaxy was about to learn a new rule. You don't attack humans and walk away. You don't kill human doctors and nurses and expect to continue living the same life. The war with the hegemony was almost over, but Voss's real work was just beginning. 3 years after the attack on the Mercy's Call, Axel Voss sat in a conference room that overlooked the swirling nebula of the Andromeda Gateway. Across from him were representatives from the Galactic Council, all trying to understand how humanity had become so influential so quickly. Ambassador Amelia Sterling led the human diplomatic team, but everyone in the room knew that Voss held the real power. The quiet man who had once been a doctor had somehow become the most important person in the galaxy. The war with the hegemony of Sectar was over, not because of a climactic battle or a negotiated peace, but because the hegemony had simply ceased to exist. 4 member species had switched sides, 3 others had declared neutrality, and the main sector fleet was trapped in their home system, unable to obtain fuel or supplies. "The terms we are proposing are reasonable," Sterling was saying to the council mediators. "Full reparations for the hospital ship attack, trial of Grand Admiral Zekthul for war crimes, and ironclad guarantees of protection for all medical vessels." The Crystalline Dominion's representative, a being of living crystal that refracted light in mesmerizing patterns, spoke in harmonic tones. "These terms are acceptable for ending a war, but we are concerned about human expansion during the conflict." Voss leaned forward slightly. "What expansion would that be?" The crystal being's form shifted through different colors as it accessed data. "Our intelligence indicates that human fleets now patrol trade routes in 23 star systems. Human corporations have established major operations in 51 worlds. Human technology is being used in over 300 colonies across the galaxy." "Yes," Voss said simply. "Is there a problem with that?" General Atlas Kane, Voss's military coordinator, activated a holographic display showing the galaxy before and after the war. The transformation was striking. "Before the war, human influence was limited to about 60 star systems," Kane explained. "Today we have economic or military presence in over 400 systems. We've achieved this without conquering anyone or forcing anyone to join us." The Neural Collective's representative, a cybernetic entity with glowing neural interfaces, processed this information. "Your expansion appears benign, but our analysis suggests something more complex. You have made other species dependent on human technology and trade." Voss nodded. "That's correct." The admission stunned the room. Dr. Aria Blackstone, who led humanity's technology integration program, stood and activated another display showing the intricate web of dependencies that now connected the galaxy. "The Botanical Commune's atmospheric processors use human-designed filtration systems," Blackstone explained. "Without them, 23 of their colony worlds would become uninhabitable within months." She continued. "The Crystalline Dominion's quantum communication networks run through relay stations that we built and maintain. Disabling those relays would cut off instantaneous communication between their star systems. The Neural Collective's defense grids use ammunition that can only be manufactured in human facilities. Their weapons would be useless within weeks if we stopped supplying them." The representatives exchanged worried glances. They were beginning to understand what had really happened during the war. Voss stood and walked to the massive window overlooking space. 3 years ago, a Sectar admiral decided to attack a hospital ship. He thought he was eliminating a threat. Instead, he taught humanity an important lesson. "What lesson?" asked the crystalline representative. "That the galaxy operates under the law of the strong," Voss said. "The strong do what they want, and the weak suffer." Grand Admiral Zekthul was strong, so he destroyed a ship full of doctors and patients. The Galactic Council was weak, so they did nothing about it. Voss turned back to face the room. "So we decided to become strong, not through conquest or terrorism, but through intelligence and necessity." Victoria Hayes, who coordinated human economic integration across the galaxy, presented financial data that told an incredible story. In just 3 years, human companies had become essential to the galactic economy. "We didn't force anyone to buy our products," Hayes explained. "We just made them better and cheaper than anything else available. Alien corporations couldn't compete. They either went out of business or asked to become our partners." Commander Orion Cross, the trade coordination specialist, showed shipping routes and supply chains. "Every major trade route in the galaxy now passes through at least one human-controlled station. We don't charge unfair prices or restrict legitimate commerce, but if we needed to, we could shut down galactic trade in a matter of hours." The Neural Collective's representative processed this information. "You have created a form of control that does not appear to be control. Other species believe they are independent, but they are actually dependent on your systems." "Yes," Voss said. "And because they don't feel conquered, they don't rebel. Because our rule benefits them, they support it. Because we protect their interests, they trust us." Admiral Nova Thompson, Voss's strategic coordinator, presented the military situation. Human fleets were now stationed throughout the galaxy, but not as occupying forces. They were there as peacekeepers, protecting trade routes and responding to emergencies. "We have more military power than any single species," Thompson explained, "but we use that power to maintain peace, not to conquer territory. Piracy has been virtually eliminated from the major shipping lanes. Interspecies conflicts are resolved through mediation rather than warfare." "What happened to the hegemony of Sectar?" asked the botanical commune representative, a plant-like being with bioluminescent flowers for sensory organs. Voss's expression grew cold. "Grand Admiral Zekthul is in a human prison awaiting trial for war crimes. The hegemony government has been dissolved. The individual species are now separate nations, and most have requested human protection and trade agreements." The room fell silent as the representatives processed this information. In 3 years, humanity had gone from being a minor species to being the dominant power in the galaxy. And they had done it so smoothly that most civilizations hadn't realized what was happening until it was too late. "What do you want from the council?" asked the crystalline representative. Voss looked at each representative in turn. "We want a permanent seat on the council with veto power over military actions. We want the authority to enforce medical neutrality laws throughout the galaxy. And we want recognition as the official peacekeeping force for interstellar trade." "And if we refuse?" asked the Neural Collective representative. Voss gestured to the data displays showing the galaxy's dependence on human systems. "Then you'll discover how difficult it is to run a civilization without computers, atmospheric processors, quantum communications, or interstellar commerce." The threat was polite but unmistakable. The galaxy could accept human leadership willingly, or they could learn what happened when they opposed it. Ambassador Sterling cleared his throat. "Of course, we hope it won't come to that. Humanity prefers cooperation to conflict. We want to work with the Council to create a safer, more prosperous galaxy for everyone." The representatives requested time to consider the human proposals. As they filed out of the conference room, Voss remained by the window, looking out at the stars. "Do you think they'll agree?" Kai asked. "They don't have a choice," Voss replied. "We've made ourselves indispensable. Every species in the galaxy now depends on us for something critical. They can't afford to oppose us. And if they try..." Voss thought about Dr. Kira Ashworth dying as she tried to protect a child. He thought about the hundreds of medical personnel who had been murdered while trying to help others. "Then they'll learn why attacking human civilians was the worst mistake anyone ever made," he said quietly. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity hadn't just won a war. They had quietly taken control of everything that mattered. And they had done it so elegantly that most species would never even realize they were no longer truly independent. The age of human dominance had begun. It would be enforced not through fear, but through necessity. 7 years after the attack on the Mercy's Call, Axel Voss stood in a magnificent memorial garden floating in the depths of space. The Kira Ashworth Memorial Garden was located at the heart of New Geneva Station, humanity's first orbital city and the new de facto capital of galactic government. The garden was a place of peace and reflection. Holographic displays showed the faces of everyone who had died on the hospital ship, with Dr. Kira Ashworth's image at the center, her compassionate face looking out at the stars she would never see again. Voss was older now, his hair silver, and his face lined with the weight of responsibility. He wore the simple uniform of humanity's Director of Galactic Affairs, though most people just called him the Architect of the New Order. Dr. Amelia Carver approached him. Carver was one of the few survivors from the Mercy's Call and now served as Chief Medical Officer for New Geneva Station. He had been Voss's friend through all the dark years since the attack. "The new medical protection protocols are working perfectly," Carver reported. "We haven't lost a single hospital ship in 4 years. The defense systems you designed are impregnable." Voss nodded, still looking at Kira's image. She would have been proud of that. She would have been proud of all of it. The galaxy had indeed changed completely since the war ended. Human fleets patrolled every major trade route, not as conquerors, but as protectors. The old system where the strong could prey on the weak was gone forever. Admiral Luna Chang, the current military coordinator, appeared on his communication device. "Sir, we have the monthly reports from all sectors. Piracy is down another 12%. Trade disputes are at record lows. We haven't had a single attack on civilian vessels in 10 months. What about the former hegemony territories? Voss asks. All stable. The individual species are thriving under independence. Most have requested permanent human advisors to help with their governmental transitions. Voss smiled slightly. The species that had once been enslaved by the Sectar were much happier as independent nations under human protection. They had stronger economies, safer trade routes, and more personal freedoms than they had ever known under the hegemony. Captain Dylan Rivera commanded the new hospital ship Dr. Kira Ashworth, which now operated in the Outer Rim territories. His ship was protected by technology that made the old Mercy's Call look defenseless. The Ashworth is reporting another successful mission, Chang continued. They treated over 400 patients from 6 different species last week. No incidents, no problems. Voss felt deep satisfaction hearing that. The new medical protection laws meant that attacking a hospital ship wasn't just illegal, it was impossible. Human technology could detect hostile intent from parsecs away, and human fleets could respond within hours to any threat. Dr. Zara Okafor appeared in the garden, carrying her research files. She was a sociologist who had been studying humanity's rise to galactic dominance, trying to understand how it had happened and what it meant for the future. I've been reviewing the timeline again, Okafor said, sitting on a bench near Kira's memorial. In 7 years, you've created the most peaceful period in galactic history. Crime is down, trade is up, and there hasn't been a major war anywhere in known space. That was the goal, Voss replied. But you've also created something that no one talks about openly, Okafor continued. You've made humanity the unofficial rulers of the galaxy. Every major decision, every trade agreement, every military action, it all goes through us now. Voss turned away from Kira's memorial to face the sociologist. And is that a bad thing? I don't know, Okafor admitted. The galaxy is certainly more peaceful, but we've also eliminated the independence of hundreds of species. They think they're free, but they're completely dependent on our systems. Dr. Okafor, Voss said quietly, let me ask you something. In the old system, how many hospital ships were attacked? How many innocent civilians died in wars that served no purpose? How many species lived in terror of their stronger neighbors? Okafor consulted her datapad. Based on historical records, thousands of hospital ships over the past century, billions of civilian casualties, at least 47 species were driven to extinction by aggressive neighbors. And in the 7 years since we took control, 0 hospital ships attacked. Civilian casualties in the low hundreds, mostly from accidents or natural disasters. No species extinctions. Okafor paused. Your point is taken. Dr. Carver sat down beside them. I think about Kira every day. She believed that healing was the most important thing anyone could do. She died protecting a child she didn't even know. And now children across the galaxy sleep safely because of what we built in her memory, Voss added. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Voss activated his communication device, and the hologram of Commander Sage Williams appeared. Sir, we have a situation developing in the Outer Spiral. A species called the Korthak have declared war on their neighbors, the Thyssen Republic. Intelligence suggests the Korthak are planning to target civilian populations. Voss's expression hardened. How many ships do they have? Approximately 200 vessels, mostly outdated designs. The Thyssen have requested our intervention. Deploy the 5th Fleet to the region. Full peacekeeping protocols. The Korthak are to cease all hostile actions immediately or face the consequences. And if they refuse? Williams asked. Voss looked back at Kira's memorial. Then they'll learn what happens to anyone who threatens innocent lives. Commander Williams nodded and ended the transmission. Within hours, human ships would be positioning themselves between the warring fleets, and the conflict would end, one way or another. Dr. Okafor watched this exchange with fascination. You just committed to potentially fighting another species, and you did it without consulting anyone. No vote, no debate, no international approval. The galaxy gave us that authority, Voss replied. They voted us peacekeeping powers because they trust us to use them wisely. But what if you're wrong? What if the Korthak have legitimate grievances? Then we'll investigate and find a solution that doesn't involve killing civilians, Voss said firmly. That's what peacekeepers do. 24 hours later, Commander Williams reported back, "The Korthak fleet surrendered without firing a shot. Apparently, seeing our ships arrive was enough to convince them that war wasn't worth the risk." And their dispute with the Thyssen? Turns out it was about mining rights in an asteroid field. Our mediation team worked out a profit-sharing agreement. Both sides are happy. Voss smiled. This was how it was supposed to work, preventing wars rather than winning them. Any casualties? None. The closest thing to violence was a Korthak captain who punched a wall when he realized he'd have to split the mining profits. Dr. Carver laughed. Kira would have loved that. A war that ended with hurt feelings instead of hurt people. As the years passed, the pattern continued. Human fleets would appear wherever conflicts threatened to escalate, and somehow those conflicts would be resolved peacefully. The galaxy had become accustomed to this new reality. Wars simply didn't happen anymore. But Voss wasn't content with just maintaining peace. He was building something larger. 5 years later, he stood before the reformed Galactic Council in its new chamber aboard New Geneva Station. Representatives from over 300 species filled the vast amphitheater. But everyone understood that this was really humanity's government now. The Medical Protection Act has been unanimously ratified, announced Secretary General Elena Vasquez, who served as humanity's official representative to the Council. Any attack on medical personnel or facilities will now be considered an act of war against the entire galactic community. There was scattered applause, but Voss noticed that it came mostly from species who had suffered under the old system. The former major powers were less enthusiastic about laws that limited their options. After the session, Ambassador Zara Okafor, now serving as Earth's cultural liaison, approached him. "The Crystalline Dominion is getting restless. Their representatives have been asking questions about human expansion again." "What kind of questions?" Voss asked. "They want to know if we have plans for their territory. Apparently, some of their colonies have been requesting human trade agreements and defense partnerships." Voss wasn't surprised. The Crystalline Dominion was one of the few remaining powers that still maintained true independence from human systems. But their younger colonies were increasingly attracted to the prosperity and security that came with human partnerships. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that we don't conquer anyone. We just provide better options." That evening, Voss walked through the memorial garden again, something he did every day. Kira's face looked out at him from the central hologram, forever young, forever compassionate. "Are we doing the right thing?" he asked her image quietly. Of course, there was no answer. But Voss knew what Kira would have said. She would have pointed out that no one was being forced to accept human help. She would have noted that children across the galaxy were safer now than they had been in centuries. She would have reminded him that sometimes the best way to protect the innocent was to make sure the guilty couldn't hurt them. A soft footstep behind him announced Dr. Carver's arrival. His old friend joined him in looking at the memorial. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the Sectar hadn't attacked the Mercy's Call?" Carver asked. "Sometimes," Voss admitted. "We'd probably still be a minor species, keeping to our own territory, treating our own people. The galaxy would still be governed by whoever had the biggest fleet." "And Kira would still be alive," Carver said softly. "Yes, she'd still be alive." Voss was quiet for a moment. But millions of other people would be dead instead. Children who lived because we stopped wars before they started. Doctors who survived because medical neutrality became sacred law. Entire species who exist because no one dares to commit genocide anymore. Carver nodded. "She'd call that a fair trade." "I hope so." A priority alert chimed on Voss's communication device. He activated it to find Admiral Luna Chang with an urgent expression. "Sir, we have a major situation. Long-range sensors have detected an unknown fleet approaching from beyond the galactic rim. They're not responding to our communications, and their technology doesn't match anything in our databases." Voss felt a chill run down his spine. For the first time in over a decade, humanity was facing a completely unknown threat. "How many ships?" he asked. "Over 1,000, sir, and they're big. Some of them are larger than our dreadnoughts." Voss looked at Kira's memorial one more time, then turned to face the new challenge. The galaxy had been peaceful for so long that most people had forgotten how dangerous the universe could be. "Alert all fleet commanders," he ordered. "Activate the defense grid around New Geneva Station, and send a message to every species in the galaxy. We may all need to work together on this one." As he walked quickly toward the command center, Voss realized that everything he had built, the peace, the prosperity, the safety, was about to be tested by forces beyond anything they had faced before. The unknown fleet was still months away, but Voss was already planning. The galaxy had become accustomed to human protection, but now they would discover just how far humanity was willing to go to keep that protection strong. Whatever was coming from beyond the stars, it would find a galaxy that was no longer divided by petty conflicts and ancient grudges. It would find a civilization that had learned to work together under human guidance. And if these newcomers thought they could simply conquer this galaxy the way the Sector had once tried to do, they were about to discover that attacking humanity's protected species was an even bigger mistake than attacking a human hospital ship. The real test of Voss's new order was approaching. Soon they would learn whether the peace he had built was strong enough to survive a war unlike any they had ever faced. In the memorial garden, Kira Ashworth's hologram continued to look out at the stars, her face serene and hopeful, watching over the galaxy she had died trying to heal. The galaxy she had in death helped humanity save.